Hi, Crime Junkies. I'm your host, Ashley Flowers.
And I'm Britt.
And the story I have for you, it is about the baffling murder of a young woman. It is the kind of case where, everything feels like it's going to fall into place at first with all of the pieces that they have. They literally have the murder on film. So investigators are super confident that they're going to catch their killer within hours. But 6 years have gone by, and it is still unsolved. And Britt, this is one where truly, when I say I have no idea what happened, I have no idea what happened. Because there is no theory that makes complete sense. And Nina and I, she's the reporter that worked on this, we were in my office, going round and round and round for literally an hour talking about theories and feelings, and we were just losing our minds because we're trying to get the pieces to add up. But this woman's family is hoping that someone, maybe somebody listening or watching right now, can help bring the justice that they've been seeking so desperately. This is the story of Elizabeth Baraza. It's around 7:20 on the morning of Friday, January 25th, 2019, when Bob and Rosemary Nellie wake up to their phones buzzing. And it's a notification from the alarm system on their daughter's home. Now, they know Elizabeth, Liz as everyone calls her, is holding a garage sale that day. So at first, they think that she might have just accidentally set it off while she's going in and out of the house or whatever. But when they call her to check, she doesn't answer the phone. And things get even more unsettling when the alarm company contacts them directly because they tried calling Liz and they can't get a hold of her either. So Rosemary gives them the go-ahead to notify police, and she and Bob throw on some clothes, jump in the car, and head straight to Liz's home in Tomball, Texas, which is 15 minutes away. Bob told our reporter, Nina, that a lot of that morning is just a blur for him at this point. But he does remember speaking to their daughter's husband, Sergio Barraza, on the drive over. Now, Sergio's not home. As a crew chief for his father's flooring company, he'd already left for the day. But he tells them that he also got the alarm alert. And when he checked their Nest doorbell camera, the live feed for it, he saw police tape and cops, in the background. And he even, this is wild, he used the speaker on the doorbell camera to try and talk to them, but what is going on? Mm-hmm. He did get someone's attention, but they wouldn't tell him what was happening. They just said that he needed to get home immediately. So when Bob and Rosemary pull into Liz's neighborhood, it is every parent's worst nightmare unfolding before their eyes. Their daughter's usually quiet street is swarming with emergency vehicles. First responders tell them that a young woman has just been airlifted to the hospital. And as they get closer, they realize that all the commotion and activity is centered around their daughter's house. And there is this trail of blood on the driveway mixed in near items that she had set out for the garage sale. Now, initially, officers are tight-lipped, but they tell Bob and Rosemary the most critical detail, and that is that it was Liz, their daughter, who's been shot.
How did they set off her alarm if she was shot out by the driveway?
So the police were actually the ones who set it off.
Oh.
They were responding to 911 calls of gunshots in the neighborhood, and when they arrived, she was laying on the driveway near the garage, still breathing, but barely. She had a faint pulse. That's where she was shot, and the alarm only went off when officers went through the unlocked door between the garage and the house to secure the scene. Mm-hmm. So Bob and Rosemary are reeling. Liz is the most positive person they know. She's creative, she's kind, always helping others. She's a Harry Potter fanatic who spends her free time reading and dressing as Star Wars characters to visit sick kids. So in the immediate moment, they're who on earth would do this to our daughter? And this isn't a high crime area either we're talking about. It is this nice middle-class neighborhood. Drive-by shootings are not something that they deal with. So before her parents can even begin to wrap their heads around this, Sergio pulls up. And police ask him to stay nearby for questioning. So while he waits there, along with his mom, who shows up to be with him, the Nellies rush to the trauma center to be with their daughter. They are clinging to hope the whole 40-minute drive over, praying that she's going to pull through. But when they get to the hospital, the same one where Liz spent so many hours volunteering, doctors tell them that she's not going to make it. She's been shot point blank 4 times, once through the side of her neck, twice in the chest, and finally once in the head. So while Liz is still technically alive, police know that it's going to be a homicide case now. And while her parents grieve, the Harris County Sheriff's Office jumps in with Deputy Michael Ritchie at the helm. And as he and other investigators question Sergio, it quickly becomes clear to them that it actually hadn't been a typical morning for the couple, even before the shooting. So normally, Liz leaves for work by 6:30, 6:45, but she had taken the day off for that garage sale she was doing, which she had prioritized to make some extra spending money for her and Sergio's trip to Disney and Universal Studios. They were supposed to leave for Florida that Sunday to celebrate their upcoming 5th wedding anniversary. So between what Sergio tells investigators and what they're able to pull from the doorbell camera footage that he gives them, police know that Liz was up super early. She went to Starbucks at 6:08, and then the couple started setting up the sale in the driveway when she got back. And then Sergio left for work at exactly 6:48. Now, Sergio says that he drove to a Lowe's about 5 miles away to meet his flooring crew. Everything was fine until he got that security alert on his phone. And he explains that on his way home, he actually actively was rewinding the doorbell footage, trying to find out what happened. And while he couldn't see the shooting itself, he could hear it. And he shares the footage with investigators too. Now, the sound quality isn't great, but what is audible is Liz greeting someone, and she's cheerful. She says, "Good morning." And there's this muffled, brief exchange of words, followed by 4 deafening gunshots. And then Liz screams. And there has been endless speculation about what was said in that quick conversation. But even after detectives enhance the audio, all they can hear for sure is just Liz's good morning, the shots and the scream.
So there's no visual of the shooter themselves?
Well, not on the Baraza's camera, but a neighbor's security camera caught the entire thing. This is what is so wild and why I said this case is so frustrating. So as Deputy Ritchie reviews all of the footage that he can get his hands on, he cannot believe how brazen it was. So what he sees is there's this dark-colored pickup that pulls up at around 6:52 a.m. This is 4 minutes after Sergio left. The truck first passes Liz's house, then it makes a U-turn, parks at the curb, and then the driver, who appeared to be alone in the vehicle, leaves the vehicle running, walks over to where Liz was setting up, and it's so weird. They're wearing what looks like a disguise.
What?
It's this, you can't really see because it's still dark outside. So the footage is almost like night vision, kind of. But it's a flowy coat or robe paired with what detectives call go-go style boots. I can't really see the boots. And then maybe really this person has a really long hair, or it might be a wig. And I'm saying they because police can't even determine if this shooter is a man or a woman. The video quality, like I said, is super poor. Everything's cast in this bluish gray tint. But this shooter approaches Liz. You can see them have this exchange. It looks like they might even have shown her something. There's this moment where it looks like
a kind of a transaction.
Yeah. But police don't find anything like a note at the scene
or pamphlet or anything.
Yeah. And this person pulls out a gun and they shoot her 3 times. She collapsed and then they stood over her, and that's when they fired that final shot to her head. And then as soon as that final shot is fired, they run back to their truck and leave. The entire encounter is over in less than a minute.
Which is a super short amount of time, but I'm thinking people are leaving for work, taking their dogs on walks. Did anyone see this happen?
No. Like I said, it was still kind of dark out. Multiple people heard the gunshots. They're the ones who contacted 911. The A first call actually came from a man who lived across the street. He had a clear view of the shooter's truck, which he's able to tell them is a Nissan Frontier that is almost certainly black. But this is what's really puzzling to investigators, is that in less than 2 minutes after the neighbor called, while he was still on the phone with dispatch, there's this eerie moment where the truck drives back past the Baraza's house again. And everything about this crime looks so professional and planned and deliberate, but this doubling back past the scene, this is the part that seems sloppy, like an amateur move that almost certainly would have gotten them caught, given the right circumstances.
Were they coming back to get something? Did they stop, or was it just a drive-by?
No, they didn't stop. They didn't get out. I don't know what the reason was. And unfortunately, again, this should have been a sloppy move, but for whatever reason, luck was on this shooter's side because no one gets a good look at their license plate number, and none of the surveillance footage that they do get is clear enough to ID it. But still, in those early times, Deputy Ritchie is optimistic. They've got this video footage, plus constables were on the scene within minutes, and they quickly put out a bolo for a black Nissan Frontier.
So whoever did this didn't get a big head start?
No, minutes top from the time police arrived. But the real reason that Ritchie is so confident is that this seems way too methodical to be random. This had to have been targeted.
Feels pointed.
Right. Take how the shooter approached. When they pulled up, the Baraza's house was to their left. So the driver's side door was already facing the driveway. The easiest move would have been to just stop right next to it, quick in, quick out. Instead, they make that U-turn. They turn around and park farther down the street. That meant getting out, walking around the front of the truck to reach the driveway, then running back after the shooting. But the maneuvering kept them mostly hidden from the Baraza's Nest camera. So Deputy Ritchie thinks that they knew where that camera was and what that camera could see.
And maybe they parked further away because they had spotted that camera.
Maybe. But whoever did this, the real feeling they're getting is that they must know a lot about the Barazas. I mean, on any other day, Liz would not have even have been home, let alone outside alone. Now, investigators figure that Sergio is going to give them a name. Who is the person that has a grudge against Liz who drives a black Nissan Frontier? Case closed. But that's not what happens. Sergio mentions there is one woman who Liz had a disagreement with. She is a member of a Star Wars fan group that they belong to. It's called the 501st Legion. But he insists that, whatever disagreement they had, it was petty drama, nothing that would ever lead to murder. Actually, the first thing Sergio suggests is maybe this was some kind of robbery gone wrong.
I really think this was just some robbing her for $100. Well, at this point, kind of looks
But police know that doesn't track. Nothing had been taken. Liz had $100 in a lockbox for making change for the garage sale. That's still there untouched.
So, obvious question, but what about Sergio?
You're right, it is obvious, and Deputy Ritchie isn't taking anything Sergio says at face value. He knows they have to start at square one, and square one is always the person closest to the victim. Two branches of the same tree. Two pieces of a soul. Where one sister goes, the other will be, for she is but half of the whole. The Missing Half. Pre-order your copy at ashleyflowers.com. The investigators ask about the couple's marriage, which according to Sergio is perfect. They've been together for years, just living their best lives with their dachshund Diesel, no affairs, no serious issues. He tells them that he would never harm Liz. And detectives are confident that he didn't pull the trigger. I mean, even if they hadn't checked with the people that he met up with at Lowe's, he doesn't even match the shooter seen on camera. He's way more heavy set than the person on the footage. To be fair, they know that doesn't rule out his involvement.
Right.
Now, in the moment, he's cooperative, he's respectful, even when Deputy Ritchie tells him hey, nothing personal, but like as the husband, you're probably the prime suspect. But he gives them access to everything, the house, their electronics, his phone, Liz's phone, which she had with her. And according to an episode of On the Case with Paula Zahn, he even tells them about a life insurance policy that she had through her employer, which he would be the beneficiary of, although he says that he doesn't even think it's worth that much. But from the start, investigators think, even if he is so cooperative, like there is something off about him. Like Sergio keeps saying how worried he was about Liz holding that garage sale alone, that he encouraged her to have someone with her, but she said she'd be fine. And that's actually why the alarm was set on the house to begin with, even though she was outside. He says that he had her set it on the door from the garage at the house. That way, if anything went wrong, all she would have to do was run to the door and open it, and then help would be on the way.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to decide where the line is between like crime junkie paranoid and laying out all this groundwork to cover your tracks.
It's strange, yeah. Again, they're in a pretty nice neighborhood too, which is like I keep taking into account. I don't think there was like a history of garage sale robberies or anything, even remotely close. But Sergio like just tells police that they're just super cautious people. But that isn't the only thing that's raising red flags. His overall demeanor is odd to them. Like sitting in a police car listening to the doorbell camera audio with Deputy Richie, he almost seems calm. Like the deputy is expecting some kind of reaction as they hear those like booming gunshots and they hear Liz scream. But Sergio's face is just blank. Now, some early police reports claim that Sergio never asked about Liz's condition, but that is actually not entirely accurate. So he was talking to investigators from at least 2 different agencies, and while he might not have asked everyone, at some point he definitely inquired about her status and whether he could go to the hospital. But when detectives finish questioning him and tell him he can leave, he doesn't. Deputy Richie watches as he kind of just lingers around. He's like talking to neighbors. He's checking out what the media is doing.
Is he aware that Liz isn't going to make it?
I'm not sure what investigators have told him or like what updates he's getting from her family, but obviously he knows that she's shot and has been airlifted to the hospital.
Right, like it's clearly a pretty serious injury.
Yeah, and his lack of urgency isn't what detectives expect in that situation. Now, meanwhile, the Nellies are at the hospital trying to process what feels like a nightmare. Liz is registered under an alias in case the shooter is still after her, which is like such a weird like reality for them to be in. They have no idea what is going to happen next or what they're supposed to do next.
Are they wondering where Sergio, their son-in-law, is?
Not really. No, like I think everyone is just so focused on Liz, and they know police needed to question him. Plus, Bob and Rosemary trust him. They have never doubted that he loves their daughter. So when Sergio and his mom do finally get to the hospital, which is sometime that afternoon, he and Bob arrange one final act of generosity on Liz's behalf. They are going to donate her organs. And even in this devastating moment, they're thinking about how she can help others. So Liz is declared dead on Saturday, January 26th at 1:40 p.m. But she is kept on life support for the next few days to preserve her organs. Her loved ones barely leave her side during that time. I mean, they're hardly sleeping or showering, let alone thinking about the investigation. Now, Deputy Richie does show them a censored version of the shooting footage, hoping that they'll recognize the killer or maybe the truck, which they don't. But after listening to the audio, they are convinced that Liz didn't know the shooter. Because they said if she did, she wouldn't have said, like, good morning. She would have said, like, good morning, so-and-so, like their name.
And they're sure about that?
I think so. Yes, they are.
I guess I'm trying to, like, think of how I greet my friends or, like, my neighbors.
I don't say people's, I'm not like, good morning, Brad. I'm just like, hey, you. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, like, I would say, like, good morning to anyone walking down the street, I think.
Whether I knew them or not.
Yeah.
I kind of went back and forth. This is actually something I had Nina, like push on, but she said she talked to them and they are like adamant that whoever the shooter was, Liz did not know the shooter. So by this point, the shooting video is circulating in the media as well. And while it hasn't given police the big break that they thought it would, it is still a huge help. They might not be able to ID the killer, but they can start ruling people out. Like Liz was 5'2", and all things considered, detectives estimate that the killer was somewhere between 5'4" and 5'8". And they think they have an athletic build. Maybe they're like 140 to 175 pounds.
Do they have a better sense of the shooter's gender?
No, it's not clear enough on the video for them to say. There's a lot of early speculation that it's a woman. Deputy Ritchie specifically thinks their mannerisms and gait appear kind of feminine, but he knows that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But while they're grappling with the uncertainty, they are getting clarity on other areas too. So like piecing together a timeline of the killer's movements from the area surveillance cameras. Now, it turns out that the Frontier was in the Barraza's neighborhood hours before the shooting, at around like 2 a.m, though investigator Ritchie says that it didn't pass by their house at that time.
It was just in the neighborhood.
And they can't see who's driving because the footage is too grainy. And without a plate number, they can't be 100% sure that it's the same Frontier, but like everything else matches. They're like pretty sure it was in the neighborhood at 2 a.m.
Which makes even less sense if we're working off the theory that they knew she'd be outside and timed it to when like Sergio might be leaving. Then why even get there that early? Why would you be waiting around at 2 a.m? Like, if they're already there, why not attack when she goes out to get Starbucks at like 6 o'clock?
It's not, I don't think they think that the person was sitting there from like 2 to 7, or at least that's like, or at least maybe not in the same spot. The camera only catches them, from what I understand, briefly at around 2. But then after that, we don't know where the truck goes or what they're doing. Like,
if it's even there in the neighborhood at all.
Were they lying in wait off camera? Maybe. Did they leave and then come back? What we do know for sure is that they're back at around 6:48 a.m., literally right as Sergio was leaving for work.
So there's a chance that they came by at 2 to scope the area out.
Maybe. But even that doesn't totally make sense because, like, they didn't actually, or apparently...
They weren't by the house at 2. They were just, like, in the neighborhood.
Right, because they didn't drive... Like the Barraza's camera doesn't pick them up. So if they're scoping out the house, they're scoping the house out outside of
where the house actually
the camera
is.
view, which to me would mean that you already know about the house or that there's a camera.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It feels like pre-scoped.
Right. But maybe they were just getting a feel for the neighborhood or like how they're going to
like escape route situation.
Anyways, when they returned later that morning, the driver briefly rolled into the parking lot of a preschool near the entrance of the Barraza's subdivision. Then they pulled out and headed toward their street. But instead of turning right toward their house, they make that left, hit a U-turn, stop the truck, and then cut the lights. Now, from where they parked, they could see Liz's house, but it seems like they knew Sergio's van would pass them almost. Like about 4 minutes after he left, that's when the killer makes their move. And I know this is a lot to visualize, so we are going to have maps and stuff on the blog post, along with links to the videos that I've been talking about, which various news sites have already shared. The whole thing seems carefully planned. Even the murder weapon, which they haven't found, points to that. So there were no shell casings at the scene, suggesting that the killer used a revolver, likely a .38 caliber based on the bullets that they recovered. And revolvers keep their shell casings inside, which would be a smart choice for anyone who wants to avoid like leaving evidence behind or having to take the time to clean up evidence they left behind. So someone went to a lot of trouble to kill Liz and to get away with it. But now police need to figure out why, because the why should lead them to the who. And as detectives delve into Liz's world, there is one major focus, and that's the 501st Legion, that Star Wars group. This isn't some casual fan club. It requires a serious commitment from members who dress as Star Wars villains while doing charity work, which makes them think kind of about the strange disguise that the shooter wore. Maybe that unusual flowy costume and those boots could have been part of a stormtrooper uniform, maybe. Like I actually have, it's so hard to see, but I have like a screenshot. And I think it's actually better like in motion.
In the video, yeah.
Yeah, because you can see, I've heard Princess Leia somewhere as well, but you can like see how it flows out.
It's definitely, you described it as like a robe. Or
I
like
thought it
a
looked
long,
like a house robe.
Yeah, like a long coat that's like kind of billowing out or could billow out. And then there's definitely like, again, go-go boots or now that you mention it, stormtrooper boots would
That's what they think.
make sense.
I don't know. And listen, like, even though, like, most of what this group is about is charity, anytime you have a large, passionate group of people, drama feels a little inevitable. And Liz's local squadron was no exception. Investigators hear about personality clashes, rivalries, arguments.
And what about the woman that Sergio had mentioned earlier, especially since there's a chance the shooter might be female?
They check her out, but after interviewing her, they're convinced that she's not involved. And actually, after looking at all of them in this group, they don't think Liz's killer was on the group's roster. And by the way, none of them drive a Frontier. So at that point, the investigators turn their attention to another big part of Liz's life, her job. Now, she's a data reporter at the Rosen Group, which is this company that inspects oil and gas pipelines. So she worked at the Houston branch with a small, close-knit team, and it doesn't take investigators long to clear all of them, too. Liz was the only one who was out of office that Friday, and when they map out her colleagues' addresses and times that they showed up for work, it is clear that none of them could have killed her. And again, no Frontiers in the mix.
So what about her actual work? Like, could she have found out about something she wasn't supposed to?
Deputy Ritchie considers that, but he says that her job duties were, like, really straightforward. She literally just, like, took data from robots that inspect pipelines and then turned in reports. So, like, there is nothing he can see that would make her a target. The thing that seemed to maybe make her a target, or I should say, like, an easy target on that particular day, was the garage sale. And I have to believe, like so many people I've seen, like, talk about this on the internet, like, that is the key to everything, because it turns out that almost no one knew she was having it that day. The only people in Liz and Sergio's life that they told about the garage sale were some family members and her coworkers. They didn't post anything online. Sergio says that they only put up 2 signs, neither of which even listed the address. But it wasn't a last-minute thing either, I should say. So it was Liz's idea, and her mom, Rosemary, told us that she had been talking about it for at least a month, although it's not clear when she finalized the date or, like, requested the time off from work.
I mean, it's not like a garage sale is a secret, though. That's kind of the whole point. I mean, surely someone mentioned it or heard about it in
Probably.
Passing in the past month.
But it's still, like, a pretty small group of people. Like, even more so now that they've ruled out her coworkers. You know what I mean? Like, at least when you post on Facebook Marketplace or something, like, your suspect pool becomes, like,
huge.
It's the whole internet,
Right.
But that didn't happen here. So we're working with, like, a very small, very specific group of people.
And why were they holding it on a Friday? Wouldn't a Saturday make more sense?
Apparently that's, like, how it's done around there. Her dad, Bob, says that Friday is, like, when the serious
like
garage
the
sale.
day.
Yeah, and Liz planned to, like, run the sale through Saturday before they left. They were going to leave on Sunday. So, like, that's just how it works down there.
And there's not some, like, garage sale spree killer out there
No.
at the time, right? Like,
No.
I don't think I've heard of any similar cases to
No.
this.
And again, police keep coming back to one thing. Based on everything they know, Liz was the target. This doesn't feel random.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like it was going to be her or someone else that day. It was about her and only her. So they go again and they look back at the person closest to her, Sergio. Now, they learned that he and Liz were college sweethearts who bonded over shared interests like traveling and dressing up for Star Wars events and Renaissance fairs. They married in February of 2014, bought their house a couple of years later, and truly, detectives comb through their stuff, their phones, their bank records. They are looking for anything that might connect Sergio to the crime. A strange call or text around the time of the shooting, unexplained financial transactions. But there is nothing.
Yeah, but everyone knows that police check phone records. Like, what if he used a burner? I mean, did they use, like, one of those cell tower dumps that they do where they just get everything?
They wanted to, but investigator Ritchie says that the DA's office wouldn't authorize it. When you're talking about, I think what you're talking about is a cell phone dump.
Yes.
So those are actually pretty controversial because phone companies are basically turning over data on every single device that pinged a specific tower during a set of time.
So it becomes like a privacy thing.
Yeah, a wide area, even phones that, like, weren't being used. And they've become the subject of a lot of legal battles. So long story short is, if Sergio did have a burner phone, we might never know.
Right.
And I do want to add like a little caveat about their finances. So Sergio is an independent contractor for his dad's business, so he has to handle his own taxes. The Barazas have a financial advisor, but Liz managed their shared accounts. Sergio just kind of like handed over his paycheck each week, and the only separate accounts that they had were very like low-limit credit cards used to buy each other gifts, which is all that to say, yes, the bank records are clean. I don't know if that like proves everything. I mean, if you're hiring someone to kill your spouse, you're probably not paying them from your checking account, I would assume, your joint checking account.
Right, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be like a fortune that we're talking about. And we've heard stories about hitmen working for pennies, practically nothing.
Well, here's what I can tell you. So the longer the case drags on without finding the shooter, the more convinced everyone is that it was a professional hit. To your point, like, it doesn't have to be a lot, and they're sure someone was hired to do this. And while police can't connect Sergio directly to it, he is still the obvious suspect for this. But Sergio keeps cooperating. He takes and passes a polygraph. Like anything police want, he gives them.
But, I mean, when you think about everything that had to line up, like just
Perfectly.
so perfectly for all of this to happen this way.
Well, yes. And there were some inconsistencies in his story. Like at first, he told police that he and Liz put up the garage sale signs the morning of the shooting. Then later he changes, says it was the night before, which would have been Thursday, January 24th, which might not mean anything, but I'm still curious about it because I haven't spotted pictures of these signs in any of the news coverage. And in all of our reporting, we haven't actually found anyone who saw the signs.
Even Deputy Ritchie.
Deputy Ritchie hasn't even seen them. But I also don't know if police looked for them. Like with everything going on, it probably wasn't a high priority. So again, maybe it's nothing. Still, if anyone listening has seen them, like our DMs are open.
Yeah.
But honestly, the whole sign thing is pretty minor compared to what investigators learn about Liz's life insurance. So remember how Sergio told detectives that Liz had a policy, it was through her work.
But it wasn't that much money or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out me and Sergio have different ideas about like what not a whole lot means, because that policy is actually worth $250,000.
What?
Yeah, and since Liz was murdered, a double indemnity clause doubles that payout to $500,000.
And like you said, since when is $500,000 not that much?
I know, which feels like all the red flags we need.
Mm-hmm.
But hang on, because this is where like, I don't know, this might not be the smoking gun I think it would be in every like husband did it case, right? So the weird part is, by all accounts, Sergio genuinely didn't seem to know how much the policy was worth. Liz got the policy when she started working at Rosen back in 2014, and it was actually her dad, not Sergio, who encouraged her to get all of the coverage that her company offered. Bob thought it was like too good of a deal to pass up. But either way, whether he knew about it, whether he didn't know about it, like all the things, Deputy Ritchie like warned Sergio. He's like, don't even think about trying to go collect that money, because when the insurance company calls me and like asks me about my investigation, I will make it very clear that I do not want that money released until this case is solved.
But even just knowing about the policy could be enough of a motive, even if you never actually get the money.
True.
And you still haven't mentioned anyone else who knew Liz's schedule and had something to gain from her death. Just him.
Just him. Yeah, but here is the big problem with like Sergio as the mastermind theory. Every single person detectives talk to, friends, family, coworkers, everyone tells them that he and Liz were really happy together. Like normally when you dig, right, you've got the life insurance policy and the timing is so weird. There's something.
Someone like says like, oh, I thought this was weird that they did. They seem to have this in their relationship. She mentioned this one time.
There's nothing. There is like Deputy Ritchie, he digs and digs. He doesn't find anything to suggest like anything funky going on in texts, in emails. He goes through all of it. There is no hint of an affair. There is no fights, nothing. And look, like, who couldn't use an extra $500,000 to make life easier? But it's not like the couple was in major debt or anything like that. Like normally you'll see, okay, like The money was the motive. That's
Right.
not the case here. They lived within their means. He didn't need that money to get out of a bind or to start over. But there was someone else very close to Sergio who was apparently in a significant financial bind. That is Sergio's 57-year-old father, Oscar. Now, you see, Sergio's mom had recently discovered that Oscar was cheating with multiple women. And that was bad enough, but then they learned that he was also spending a lot of money on these girlfriends, like to the point where his finances were suffering. One of Sergio's paychecks that he had gotten bounced recently. And while they weren't hurting for money, Liz was understandably upset by this. And according to that Paul Lazan episode, Oscar blames Sergio's bounce check on just an accounting error. He tells investigators that his finances are totally straight, everything's good. But county court records show that around this time, Oscar was hit with several lawsuits for unpaid taxes. And in divorce filings, Sergio's mom said that he gave over $20,000 to 3 different women.
And hang on. Did Liz confront Oscar about any of this? It feels like she's kind of removed from all of this financial stuff.
She kind of was. So this is where it doesn't totally add up. Because from what Sergio tells police, she never confronted Oscar about this. Sergio says that he and Liz decided basically to stay out of it. And after all, he still worked for his dad.
Well, and it's not even like his dad would have gotten the money when Liz died. I don't see how it helps him.
The only thing that investigators have theorized is what if Oscar knew about Liz's life insurance and then he thought Sergio might invest the payout into the family business?
Okay, but if we're supposed to believe that Sergio didn't even know the amount of the policy, he likely didn't know it was going to double if she was murdered, how the heck would Oscar have known?
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense because police can't find any proof that Oscar did know about the life insurance. It's still a possible theory,
but it seems so far-fetched.
I know. Now, it's clear to them, same thing with Sergio. It's clear to them that the surveillance footage doesn't show Oscar. He isn't the shooter. But then they have the same question, right? Did Oscar have someone orchestrate this
It becomes Oscar is the mastermind theory.
Right.
Is Sergio suspicious of his dad at all?
Maybe. So on the Paul Lazan episode, Sergio implies that he was the one who first suggested his dad's potential connection.
Oh.
Yeah, but investigator Ritchie says that the suspicion started when Oscar lied to police and tried to downplay the affair. So I don't know where Sergio's suspicions started.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, like his son, Oscar is cooperative. He passes a polygraph, and when detectives go through his phone and bank records, they can't find anything linking him to Liz's murder. So while Oscar has made some questionable decisions with his life, there is no evidence that he plotted to have his daughter-in-law killed. And so a couple of weeks into their investigation, and police aren't much further than they were when they started. They've ruled people out, but they're not any closer to arresting anyone. And that seems impossible in a case that feels like it should be so straightforward.
Yeah.
They need something more. They need something solid to go on. So they decide they're going to go ask the public for help. And on Wednesday, February 6th, investigators and Crime Stoppers join Liz's loved ones for this big press conference to announce a $20,000 reward for information. And Bob, followed by Sergio, make heartbreaking pleas to the public.
So it seems like Liz's family is standing by Sergio.
Oh, yeah. He's actually been living with the Nellies since the shooting. So they're still presenting as one unit. They're still close. And standing next to her family, her parents and Sergio, Deputy Ritchie feels the weight of their pain and the mounting frustration of unanswered questions. But what keeps him optimistic is that they already do have a critical piece of the puzzle: information about the shooter's truck. A Nissan Frontier is what's considered a mid-sized pickup. And in Texas, where big full-size pickups dominate, he figures that it should stick out like a sore thumb. So they pour their efforts into tracking this car down, hoping that this is going to be the break they so desperately need. When Deputy Ritchie gets the registration records for Harris County, which includes Houston, and the surrounding areas, he finds out that there are over 1,000 Frontiers.
Of course.
And guess what the most popular color is?
Of course, it's got to be black.
Yes. And ultimately, they do narrow it down a bit more thanks to Nissan. They have the salesman who recognizes the specific style. So it's a 4-door Pro 4X crew cab that was made from like 2013 to 2019.
Great.
Unfortunately, the registration database only lists the basics. So it doesn't specifically say if it, like, someone has a Pro 4X or whatever, like 2-door, 4-door or what.
So they have to check every single one manually.
Not quite. So what they decide to do is they actually go and use a license plate reader system to sift through the database, highlighting potential matches and then using photos to eliminate trucks that clearly don't fit. But they also can't just go knocking on the door of every dark-colored but probably black Frontier owner in Texas. So
right.
Instead, they look for trucks caught on the plate reader camera near the crime scene that morning. But even that doesn't lead anywhere. Like, for instance, there's a black Frontier that police stopped nearby right after the shooting, but it didn't have the same decals as the killer's truck. And then they can't, like, those aren't things that can just be, like, removed on a whim.
Right.
Plus, the driver was an older Hispanic man whose body type didn't even match the shooter. So, like, they quickly ruled that one out.
Can they narrow it down by looking at, like, other connections, trying to triangulate people who, like, own a Frontier or a dark-colored Frontier and a .38 revolver?
Well, no, because it's Texas.
Oh.
Like, there's no state-level registration requirements for firearms.
Right.
And honestly, like, if I had to guess, I don't even know that the killer would use a legally registered gun for this.
And I was honestly about to say something similar about the truck. I mean, maybe it was stolen or borrowed from a friend.
Well, police look into that, like, or at least the stolen. There weren't any reports of stolen Frontiers or even, like, stolen license plates from Frontiers, like, during that whole time. But it is still possible. Or, like, they used a fake plate, or maybe they borrowed a plate and then put it back before anyone even knew. There are just, like, too many maybes for detectives to draw any real conclusions. But speaking of the truck, so the one thing they hone in on, remember the strange doubling back that the shooter did?
Yeah.
Well, surveillance footage shows that after shooting Liz, this person drove all the way to the main entrance of the subdivision, nearly a good quarter of a mile away before making a U-turn and then driving back past the Barazas. And again, initially, nobody knew what that was about, like, because they didn't get out, they didn't stop, whatever. So it gets Deputy Ritchie wondering if the shooter, maybe someone, like, called the shooter, like the person who's pulling the strings, and told them to go back and make sure she was dead. So he gets this idea. He's like, I'm going to try geofencing, which is completely different than, like, the cell tower dump we were talking about. Geofencing, like, you literally get a very specific area for a very specific time, and it'll tell you, like, what
all the activity.
Yeah. So he puts a digital perimeter around the Baraza's house, and he gets a warrant for Google location data from every device in that zone around that time of the shooting. Hope being that if a device moved in and out of the geofence at the right time, that could lead to the shooter. So detectives wait, and they wait, and finally, around May or June of 2020, they get the results. But it's another disappointment, because the only device with unusual movement belonged to first responders. So the killer, at least they're thinking, probably didn't even bring a phone with them. And there could be another simple explanation for why they came back by the Baraza house. The other thing they start thinking is, like, what if they turned around because they were trying to avoid running into police?
Oh.
Yeah, a resident security camera caught the truck heading toward a dead-end cul-de-sac right after the shooting, and that is the last anyone sees the truck. It doesn't turn around. It doesn't come back. And so
couldn't have just vanished, though.
No, they think that maybe it went off-roading, like jumped the curb, like at the end of this cul-de-sac.
And just tore out through,
like, there's, like, this greenbelt area that gets you to the main road. And they're thinking that maybe they went far enough away where law enforcement, because if you think about it, like I told you, law enforcement's there within, like, minutes. So if they're coming in the main entrance, which they probably would have used, like,
they can't get out without passing them.
Yeah, they might have seen them. They turn around and they, like, hightail it out of there.
And this feels like a no-brainer, but I assume they checked everyone in the neighborhood, like especially in that specific cul-de-sac.
So Investigator Ritchie says that they went house to house. By the way, I don't think that theory was part of the initial police investigation, though. Like, Liz's parents learned, and I'm talking about like them jumping the...
Yeah, the off-roading.
Yeah. Liz's parents learned that through a YouTuber named Aaron Stoner, who analyzes cold cases. And so while this might not be the breakthrough that catches their daughter's killer, it at least matters to Bob and Rosemary. Like, in the face of so much uncertainty, any clarity that like they can be brought brings them comfort. But it doesn't bring them answers. And life without Liz is a constant struggle. Sergio never goes back to the house that they shared. Bob helps him sell it. He stays with the Nellies for nearly a year, though eventually he does get a new place. He does start dating again. And for Bob and Rosemary, it's like that moment is bittersweet. Like, it's hard to see him moving on, but they are happy for him. I mean, they know it's what Liz would have wanted. The public, however, has like a very different reaction. Like, so it's always the people not closest to everyone who has like the strongest feelings. Because when Sergio posts something online about being engaged again, police are like flooded with tips. Rumors start swirling that he and his fiancée Amber were having an affair before Liz was murdered, that Amber was somehow involved. Sergio denies it all. He and Amber went to the same high school, but like so did thousands of other students, and they insist they didn't know each other at the time. He tells KHOU 11 reporter Grace White that they ended up meeting on a dating app in 2020, which was after her murder. Now, investigators don't just dismiss the gossip outright. By now, Michael Ritchie has been promoted to sergeant. He's transferred to another division, but he is still working the case. He goes so far as to dig through old high school yearbooks after hearing maybe there's a photo of Sergio and Amber together. He comes up empty. Amber even ends up taking a polygraph, which she passes. So while no one has been completely cleared, Sergeant Ritchie is confident that Amber had nothing to do with Liz's murder.
I mean, this is just kind of what happens, right? Like, the longer a case stays unsolved, the more room there is for speculation and misinformation and rumors and gossip.
And it's not even just because of social media that these stories are spinning. So the constable's office accidentally released incorrect information early on, which just added to the confusion of everything. And that's why Bob and Rosemary created their own website, whokilledlizbaraza.com. It gives them a chance to set the record straight, keep Liz's story alive. But they know a website alone isn't going to get them justice. Someone out there has to know something. Maybe they just need a little incentive. So on the third anniversary of Liz's murder, they announced that the reward is now up to $50,000, thanks in large part to a community fundraiser. And they're not the only ones who refuse to give up. When Sergeant Ritchie transfers back to homicide in early 2023, he takes over as lead investigator again. He's grown close to the Nellies in all this time, and he wants to get them answers. But he warns Bob and Rosemary that learning the truth about who's behind her murder is going to devastate them.
That sounds like something you would say if you knew who did it and knew that that person was close to them.
That's what I thought too. But he told us it wasn't about a specific suspect. It's more like he's been trying to prepare them from the start that whatever happened, whoever did this, it was probably someone close to them. It goes back to the original theory, right? Someone targeted her, someone who knew she'd be out there that day.
It feels very targeted.
Right.
Do her parents have any theories?
They're really careful not to point fingers. They are confident, and police agree, that this wasn't the work of just one person. They think that there was a shooter, and then there was someone who put the shooter up to it. But figuring out who those people are and why is enough to drive anyone up a wall. Like I said, Nina and I sat in my office spiraling. When I first decided we were going to cover this case, I had heard about it. I knew the story, and I was like, this has to be one where when you talk to detectives, when you talk to the family...
We're just missing a piece of it that's not in the reporting right now.
Right. Oh, we just can't say this thing out loud. Let me be the one to assure you, as a crime junkie, there is not something that I'm not telling you out loud.
You turned over every rock, and this is it.
This is it. And nothing makes sense. So in a world where nothing makes sense, what her parents have done is They've tried to focus on things that give them a sense of purpose, like the impact of Liz's final gift. The recipients of her organs had spent a combined 22 years on transplant lists before receiving her heart, her liver, kidneys, and corneas. And her best friend started the Liz Library, which donates Harry Potter books, like the sets of them, to children's hospitals in her honor. And Bob and Rosemary are channeling their energy into supporting other parents of homicide victims as well.
Are they still in touch with Sergio at all?
They're not as much as they used to be, but I mean, he joined them for another press conference on the 5th anniversary of Liz's murder. They also reached out to him on our behalf to see if he would speak with us. He told them that he would think about it, but then we never heard back. And I get it. Like, he's got a new life now. He's got a new wife. He recently became a dad. He doesn't work for his father anymore. He still, from what I can tell, doesn't know if Oscar was involved in Liz's death, and that, I would imagine, like, put a big wedge between them.
And did he ever end up collecting on that life insurance policy?
No, he told Grace White that he doesn't need it. But the reality also has to be that he knows investigators would, like, fight to keep that money from being released still. So,
And they can't just keep it away forever, though.
I mean,
can
they can ask the insurance company to deny payment. They can't block it indefinitely without a court order. And since Sergio hasn't been charged with anything, like, he could push for that money if he wanted to. I think the insurance company would probably have to pay up eventually, like, if he started that fight. But he would have to be the one to start that process.
And that won't look good.
I don't think he will. Like, he knows a lot of people believe that he's responsible for Liz's death. And I think he thinks trying to claim that money would, like, just add fuel to that fire. And again, like, the life insurance is just one piece of a larger puzzle, one that the internet sleuths have been trying to solve since the day Liz was murdered. And if you go down these online rabbit holes, which, believe me, I have, you will find every scenario under the sun. But there are a couple that I've seen pop up, like, a couple times that just it's worth hitting on. One is that the shooter might have had access to the Baraza's Nest doorbell camera system and, like, could have been monitoring their movements in real time.
Like, they were hacked?
Maybe, or there was speculation maybe that Sergio and Liz might have had a public URL enabled on their camera, meaning that anyone with the link could view the live stream. But, like, Liz's parents were adamant that's just not something she would do. And as for whether Liz or Sergio gave the login to anyone, like, I highly doubt it, since, I mean, Bob and Rosemary didn't have it, and we know how security conscious they were.
Yeah, like, if it wasn't them, who else would they have given it to?
Right. But then if someone did have it or hacked it or whatever, like, that would have left a digital footprint. And that kind of data might be able to connect to a specific person or device or location or whatever, but it doesn't seem like police accessed those records, although I don't know why they left that out.
Is there a reason people are saying this is a possibility? Like, to me, I feel like we know this person is waiting specifically for Sergio to leave. Like,
they don't need the camera.
You don't need the camera because this is, like, part of their routine.
I think we're all just grasping at straws, grasping at anything, because I'm telling you, nothing makes sense. And the timing is so precise. So another theory is that Liz's murder was a gang initiation. Like, someone had to commit a random act of violence to prove themselves. But
I'm not buying that. This doesn't feel random.
I know.
Nothing about this feels random.
And I think this one only started, at least in part, because I think that at one point it was noted that the Texas anti-gang unit got involved with the investigation. But specialized units often help with complex cases. Like, they have resources, expertise that local departments don't have. So, like, I don't read much into it. Like, if anything, I don't know. What's clear, though, is that this case has never truly gone cold. The sheriff's office has worked with the Texas Rangers. They've worked with the FBI. They are following leads across the country, even into Mexico at one point. No one has been completely ruled out as a suspect, including Sergio and Oscar. But investigators have looked at them from every angle. And as of right now, they have hit a wall. So Sergeant Ritchie is challenging himself to think differently, to reconsider every assumption. But no matter how he approaches it, he keeps circling back to the same core questions. Who knew about the garage sale? Who had motive to kill Liz? And who could fit the description of the shooter? Liz's loved ones have spent 6 years searching for those answers, and they now need Crime Junkies' help. So if you know anything about what happened to Liz Baraza, please call the Houston Crime Stoppers at 713-222-TIPS. The $50,000 reward is still on the table, and it can be collected anonymously. You can also contact the Harris County Sheriff's Office at 713-274-9100. You can find all the source material for this episode on our website, crimejunkiepodcast.com.
And you can follow us on Instagram at Crime Junkie Podcast.
Make sure to follow the channel if you want even more video episodes. And don't forget, every week in our RSS feed, you can find new Crime Junkie episodes. Search for Crime Junkie wherever you get your podcasts.